This is a first for me. I've never given a talk in Latin America before, so I have my English notes, and this is in Spanish, so I'll try to keep on the same page. I'm going to talk about how you can improve nutrient utilization in hogs. The feeding pigs has changed significantly, as you're all aware. Used to be feed was reasonable in price, and now it's probably triple what it used to be. So things that we looked at years ago and thought there wasn't enough difference to matter to be important, now they've become very important. So we look at things a little different than we used to. Some of the things I'm going to talk about, probably 6 years ago, I was in a meeting with nutritionist for a very large hog integrator, and we were talking about the fact that up in the States they came up with this idea of taking corn, turning it into ethanol, and we won't get into that, but we do, and then we take fat and turn it into biodiesel. So now fat used to be 12 cents a pound, 10 or 12, now it's 50. So it's made all this so much more expensive that you need to get every bit of nutrition out of the feed that you can. So I'm going to talk about some concepts on how to do that. Part of this is old, a way we've been doing it for a long time, but we keep fine-tuning it. So conceptually it's the same, similar process, but we've just gone further with how we do it. One of the things as a nutritionist that you have to be aware of is you have to keep track with the hogs. And our genetics have changed significantly over my career. I finished graduate school in '75 and started working in the industry. The hogs we had back then were heavy, early maturing. We sold at relatively light weights compared to what we do now. And the genetic companies have made a lot of progress, and we have animals that are much more prolific. Once upon a time, we did about 15 or 16 pigs per sow, and we got up to 20. And now we got guys that are doing 30, and I mean people that are over 75,000 sows in their system. And normally, the bigger the system, we don't do as well because there's too much of an infrastructure. It's harder to get the personal management. But they're doing 30 pigs per sow and weaning very heavy pigs. Our lean gain has changed, and early on a lot of the genetic companies focused on reducing back fat and making a leaner hog. And what they looked at was back fat and feed conversion. So indirectly, they selected hogs that wouldn't eat. They were low intake hogs. So if you have a hog that eats very little, then it's going to be a lean hog from a back fat standpoint. So they finally changed that thinking, because all they were doing was selecting pigs that ate very little, and you had to make very dense diets, almost like nursery feed all the way to market to make them grow well, especially in the summer when the weather was hot. The other thing that's changed in the States, you don't sell quite as heavy as we do. We sell hogs up there that are 127 to 130 kilos as our end weight. And those hogs, we can do that. We can go to that weight and we still have a very lean hog. So you had to change the diet structure, because we used to keep mixing lysine down as the pig got heavier. Well, you mix it down, but you don't come down as much, because there's still a tremendous amount of lean gain going on even at those heavy weights. So if you mix the feed down in lysine or amino acid density too much, then the pig gains poorer, they convert poorer, and you don't let them realize their potential. The diets that we have now, we use real high synthetics, we formulate on net energy basis, and we use enzymes to improve the nutrient utilization in a diet. If you don't, if you use a lot of bean meal, that makes a diet that's high protein, and that's a high heat increment diet. Now, shortly, probably when I get done, we're going to eat lunch. And after you eat a meal and you come back in and sit down, you're going to feel warm from the heat of digestion. And pigs are the same way. They eat a meal, you get heat. Well, if you have a lean hog, they're a high heat production animal anyway. And if you feed them a diet that increases that heat, then you drive them off feed. Years ago, people were working with growth hormone. And growth hormone is you give that hormone, you injected it, and you made the pigs grow, and they were super lean, just like a muscle man or something. They're really lean hogs. But we didn't have the synthetics then that we have now, so we did it with bean meal. So when you put all this bean meal in to make a high protein diet, they were a high heat increment hog. They're eating a high heat diet, so you drove intake down. We could get tremendous feed conversion, but the gain in the intake was poor. And now they're working with compounds so that you can inject male hogs and you don't have to castrate. And I don't know what the acceptance of that is, but those hogs will be very lean, should be very lean, and you're going to need diets that can get to the amino acid that they need without using a lot of protein, or you're going to have the intake driven down and you'll give up gain. This is some, this work I used years ago. There's a major breeding company that I used to do the nutrition farm. I fed their nucleus herds. And some of their people thought that feed was just a commodity and the cheapest stuff you could buy had to be the best, right? Because it was cheap. Well, the problem was they were not, they couldn't find the good hogs. Because they were feeding, if you take a pig, this pig's capable of 400 grams of lean gain. This pig's capable of 600 grams. And since pigs have to be supplied essential amino acids to maximize their lean growth, they can't synthesize them. So if you feed this pig, see this pig maxes out on lean gain at about a little over 1.5 kilos. And if you feed this pig the same way, you can make this pig like this pig. Now, once they started feeding like 20% protein diets, which are like 105 lysine, then we started realizing these pigs. Now this data is just on total feed, but that could be lysine, it could be energy. The only thing a nutritionist can do is we can make a pig miss its potential. Nutritionally, you can't take a pig beyond its genetic potential, but you can certainly miss it. So if you go out and spend money for new genetics and leaner hogs, and a lot of people did this years ago, they'd go buy a different genetic animal, a better hog, but they fed them the same as they had been. They didn't change the diets. And then they said, well, these hogs aren't any good. They're no better than what I had. And that's because they didn't let those pigs express the genetics that they had. So you have to keep adjusting your diet, not a monthly thing or anything, but you kind of have to stay current with what your genetic quality is, what the lean gain is, and then work the diets up. One of the ways that we would do this is we would take a barn and we would just challenge feed them. So we would feed a higher nutrient-dense diet and then measure the gain, measure the feed gain, and see if we had gotten a response or not. You can, and you got to be careful, you can go overboard. I mean, if you overfeed protein, that'll hurt you as well. If you feed too much protein, then you don't have enough energy, so the pig doesn't grow as well, and they don't convert as well, and you got an expensive diet. So you have to match feed with genetics to get the most optimum performance. The other thing that's different, and a lot of what I've done, I started doing, as I said, swine diets in '75. We introduced an amino acid formulated program back in '78 and '79, 1978 and '79. And back then, the performance improvement we got, it wasn't so much due to the hog as it was just the fact that we fixed amino acid imbalances, and we had we didn't have deficiencies, we got the balance better, and we improved the performance, and we saved money. But the only amino acids we had back then that we could afford was lysine and methionine. I mean, threonine, you could buy it, but it was too expensive. I remember the first time I ever used synthetic tryptophan, it was $100,000 a ton. $100,000 a ton. And we only did just strictly research with it because you couldn't afford it. It's still quite expensive, but over time, someone will figure out one day how to get some of these less expensive. Now we can use lysine, methionine, threonine. We do use tryptophan in early starter feeds. We use valine in early starter feeds. So there's more synthetics that we can use. But the pig now, being a leaner animal and a higher heat increment animal, using synthetics and reducing the protein helps this pig gain better and convert better than in the old days with the pig that didn't affect them all that much. Here, you're probably in about this temperature a good bit of the time, unless you're up by Quito or somewhere, then you'd be cooler. But these pigs are very much heat stressed, and I'm not here a lot, but it seems to me like you're hot in the day and you're still hot at night. So anything you can do to keep pigs on feed and eating will help your gain and help the performance of the hog. When it's hot, you can add a couple weeks. This is U.S. data. We're not as hot normally as you are. The areas of the United States that's hot typically is low humidity, so that's not as bad. North Carolina would be maybe kind of like you guys, hot and humid, and that's the worst kind of heat because it's hard to dissipate that heat. So you have to do what you can to keep the diets cool, but you can add a couple weeks to market or more. This summer, one of the groups I work with, in their research facility, that's usually, research barn is where you allot the pigs based on weight, and you take out the little guys and the big guys, and you have a uniform group, and you don't crowd them, and that's where your best management is typically. So they'll do 9/10 to a kilo a day through that research barn, and this summer they were getting 4/10 of kilo per day because of the hot, humid weather. That's how much that had driven the intake down and driven performance down. Now typically, what we do, we make winter diets and we make summer diets. So in the winter, when it's cool and we have higher intake, we can put a lower percent lysine in the diet because the pig's going to eat more, and what you're after is grams of amino acids per day. So you want them to eat so many grams a day, and you can move the diet density up and down based on intake. We used to really push that program. Years ago, we would try hard to get producers to track feed intake, tell us what the pig was eating, and then we'd adjust the diet density. That's another way you can save money if you have that data. Here, where it's hot, you're typically going to be low. And then up there, as the genetics changed, we got into more hogs that we didn't have the variability. We separate sex feed barrows versus gilts, and they're closer now. They eat similar amount because the carcass on the barrow is quite improved from what it used to be. But we would adjust that diet density. And then in the summer, you need to up the amino acid level, and if there's any way possible, you want to up the energy as well. But like I say, this summer, even though fat was high, in order to get the hogs through the barn, we still bought it, even though by our traditional standards, we wouldn't have used it. It was too high, too expensive. This is some university work where they're showing a 16% diet, I think. 16 versus a 12 with the synthetic amino acids. And it's just showing how much difference there is in heat reduction, and it's greater as you go to a higher temperature. So if you lower the protein, put in synthetics, there's that much less heat production, which allows the pig to eat more. Okay, protein synthesis is what we're after, because the pig is lean. And amino acids get talked about a lot, but amino acids is part of it. Yeah, you got to have the correct amino acid level, but you also have to have energy. There's a lot of work that's been reported that's showing in grower especially, as energy increases, lean gain increases, because you need energy to activate amino acids that are going to be hooked together to build the muscle, the hair, all the protein parts of the animal. And then protein is turned over quite a bit in the body. It's not a static. You don't lay down muscle and it just sits there. It's always turned over. And then the intestine is a spot where there's tremendous turnover. The liver and the intestinal mucosa is turning over rapidly, and there's a big premium there. So you need amino acids just for that maintenance before you get any more growth. So when you can supply extra energy either through fat or more grain, then you improve net energy or net protein synthesis. You have less protein degradation, and you've improved protein retention. Protein, you'll think I'm an anti-protein person. I'm not. You have to have amino acids and protein in the diet, but you want it as low as possible and still get the performance, because protein is a poor energy source. Protein is broken down. The excess amino acids have to be excreted. And you keep the carbon chain, but you get rid of the ammonia. So if you feed high protein, if you have urea production, or chickens, it's uric acid, or fish, ammonia. And I didn't think about it until this week, but down here you have the same issues we do. You know, we got hog barns, and then people move in. And then they complain that the hog barns stink or have odor. You know, people in the cities want to move to the country because they want country living. But when they get to the country, they don't realize what the country smells like. So then they complain about your hog farm. So if you make diets that are minimal protein, then you have less odor because there's less ammonia in the manure. And also if you have less protein, there's less water consumption, so you don't have as much manure. And if you overfeed protein, like I said, you're going to hurt, because on any basis it'll look similar, but on any basis it's not the same. We've been doing, like I said, amino acid work for a long time, and there's a lot of trials that say if you use a lot of synthetics, it'll improve the pig performance. There'll be trials that look like a tie. There'll be trials that are better. The benefit is with really lean hogs, you got a very consistent performance. So you need to formulate using a fair amount of synthetics. And I talk to people and they say, well, if we use the synthetics, it raises the price of diet. It doesn't raise the cost of the diet if you have a spec on energy. And if you look at the energy level, then the combination of grain and synthetics will be cheaper than bean meal and fat, because your oil down here is quite expensive too. So the best way to get the energy is to minimize protein, maximize grain, so you improve carbohydrate, and then you get an inexpensive energy. And this is true on grow-finish hogs. It's true as well in sows. Several years ago, people were saying that you couldn't use synthetic amino acids in sow diets. Well, they didn't read the literature. There was work done in the mid-70s that showed you could, and they didn't read that. They claimed that wouldn't work, and that's since been disproved. We started using synthetics in sow diets about 77 or 8, and we've got had a group we just started working with as a nucleus herd for a genetic company, and the lactation feed they were using had 35% soybean meal. We made the diet using synthetics and our enzymes, and we could make that diet with 27% bean meal. And then when you plot feed intake and lactation, with our diet formulation, the sows ate 0.5 to 0.6 kilos more per day. Nothing changed except the diet, just the way the diet was formulated. So if you went in and used those synthetics, reduced soybean meal, improved grain intake went up. Because the sow is like the finishing hog. She's a leaner animal than she used to be. And so she has a lot of heat increment as well. If you use those real high bean meal diets, then you drive down intake. And the lysine we feed these sows, back years ago, a lactation feed might have been 0.65 lysine. Well, now we're feeding 110, 1.2. So they're tremendously different than what they used to be. So you can use synthetics in the sow diet, and there's a group that I've worked with down here for a number of years, and one in Chile. And I told them that, and they did it, and they came back and said, boy, this really worked. This helped our feed intake go up. This is some work that I had in feed management a while back. It's a bit old, but it's still fine. This is percent added synthetic lysine, 0.12, 0.225, 3.2, or 4.2. And what you've done is the bean meal has gone from 34% to the extreme over here down to 25%. Grain went from 56% down up to 65%. And that's what you want to do. The fat was 5, and now it's 4.1. But the energy on NE, well, we kept the NE the same. The ME bounces around a little bit, and I'll talk more about this in a bit. But we're keeping net energy the same, digestible lysine the same, and this isn't what you would feed those pigs if you were looking for maximum performance. This is a 1.1 lysine, and you do that so that you put a lot of pressure on the added synthetic. If you're feeding about a 1.3 lysine, this diet would have worked fine because you probably had more lysine than you needed, so it wouldn't matter if it was coming from synthetic or where it was coming from. You have to be careful when you do these things that you don't overfeed digestible lysine or you get confused. Same way with ratio work. So when we fed this, the gain is going up as we go up in synthetics, even here. Feed conversion is 168, it goes to 161, then 157, and it goes back up a bit. We're probably a little overboard or a little too much. I have to watch my slang. Might not be interpreted too well. This one is pushing the limit on synthetic. This one's no-brainer. But you do get better gain, better feed gain. And you've got, if we weren't adjusting the fat, you'd have more energy. This guy's done a lot. His European work, he's done a lot on energy, and he's showing the same thing. If you got a 16% diet, or 14%, or a 13, the intake goes up, and average daily gain goes up. As he goes down in protein, feed intake goes up, gain goes up with it significantly. And again, it's just reducing heat increment. He's making a diet they can eat better, and gain and feed gain should be like that. If the pig eats, it's going to grow. If it doesn't eat, it's not going to grow. And that sounds simple. The absolute worst thing that can happen to you is have high feed intake and poor gain. And if you have high feed intake and poor gain of the pig, the feed conversion is going to be bad. So those two should be correlated. We used to have a program where we would track intake and we would regress and we'd predict gain based off that intake. Those two should be tied together quite closely. So as you lower crude protein, net energy is going to go up, and the net heat production goes down and net energy goes up. So there's an energy sparing effect because you don't have to break down all the excess protein. Now this is my attempt at making this look simple. This line would be 100% of the pig's requirement for arginine, histidine, lysine. In the old days, with the protein formulated diets, you had excess arginine about over five times what the pig needed. Histidine was in excess. Leucine was in quite excess. Years ago, if you were doing a corn soy diet, you fed a 16 or 18% protein to get the lysine where it needed to be. Everything else was excess. So then when we came along, we started using synthetics. We can get this right on the line, this on the line to get rid of the excess, threonine on the line to get rid of the excess. Tryptophan we can't afford. We can't afford basically in finishing diets. So it's normally the one that is at the minimum, and that stops the amount of synthetic lysine, methionine, and threonine you're going to add to the diet. So really all you've done is you've gotten rid of the excess of these other amino acids, and that's why your protein's going down. The amino acids that they need, the lysine, you still put in what they need. That's not short. So that's you can do this with high synthetics and enzyme technology. So this just shows bean meal. As bean meal goes up, feed intake goes down, and gain follows it completely. More bean meal you put in, the poorer the gain. Now that doesn't mean, I don't want you leaving here thinking that bean meal tastes bad. I don't think it has anything to do with palatability. It's the fact that when you put a lot of bean meal in there, there's a lot of heat increment, and then that heat increment drives the feed intake down. Now, how much synthetics can you add? And this has crept up over the years. As we've been able to buy more synthetics, we can put more lysine in. And this is just lysine. And in this weight range, 0.4 max, 0.3, 3.5. You know, you can go pretty high in the early grower because you have a high lysine diet. And it depends too, these would be corn soy diets. If you have distillers, that changes it as well. If you have Milo, I don't think you have that here, but that changes this because it's high in all amino, not high, but good levels of all amino acids except lysine. As you get on out heavy, you better be about here. This one I think is a bit high. Then when you change to Paline, you go back up in lysine, so now the synthetics can go up higher. And this is what I think is going on. We've done a lot of work looking at how much synthetic amino acid we can feed to pigs in late. Now I've been talking nursery and grower, and I'm switching to late finish now, but on that chart. But I think right around 30%. If you have a diet where this is a percent digestible lysine in the diet, this is the amount of L-lysine that's added, and this is of the digestible lysine, what percent is synthetic? And if it's 29 or 30, you're okay. If you get higher, like these diets here, 43%, they didn't work. This was some work from one of the universities, and they were trying to make very environmentally correct diets. And what they were doing is they'd use phytase to get phosphorus down. They'd used high levels of synthetics to get protein down. So they're trying to make environmentally friendly diets. And the problem was, and their ratios didn't look bad, but they had this much synthetic in here, so you're up here at this 40-some%. And I think what happens is when you put all that much synthetic in, it's absorbed through really quick. And the amino acids from the protein and natural ingredients are slower. So the body absorbs through the synthetic, and the other is coming behind it But in the blood system, in the liver, it's got all this lysine, but not the other amino acids. So it's out of balance. And then the body excretes the lysine. Then when the other amino acids come through, the lysine's already gone. And that's my theory. I don't have proof. But we've done a lot of this, and when we get to late, we've bought synthetic isoleucine, synthetic valine. We put all these amino acids in, and we still can't get the pig to perform. So it seems to me when you get that much, when there's 10 essential amino acids, not one. Lysine's the one everyone talks about because it's first limiting. But when you get this much of the lysine coming from synthetic, your total nitrogen intake isn't high enough. So you got to watch. You just watch out that you don't put way too much. You can't. And I see a lot of these diets. I mean, this may sound simple, but I see a lot of diets where they have 0.35% early, and they keep all the way out to the end, and then it doesn't work. You give up gain, you give up feed gain, the pigs do poor. So you can use a lot of synthetics, and I encourage your feed supplier to do that, but be careful you don't get too carried away late. Okay, this is talking about, we formulate on a net energy basis. And a lot of people wring their hands and worry that you can't do it. The pork producers have spent at least $1 million up in the States working on this. They haven't figured out anything yet. And we've been doing net energy for maybe 10 years. Down here, it's a wee bit harder to formulate on net energy basis because you have a lot of ingredients that we don't deal with. Our life's a bit simpler. We've got corn, soy, distillers, some mids maybe, Milo. We don't have as many ingredients to deal with as you do. But net energy, and people get it figured out. Even if you're not right, ME is always wrong, as far as I'm concerned. So you might as well use net energy. If you look at this diet, 63% corn, 72% corn. This is the National Research Council. And all these are formulated to 105 lysine. National Research Council, ME, it says it's 3340, 3340, 33. Now that doesn't make sense. They're not all the same energy. When you have a diet that's got 72% corn versus 63, common sense will tell you that this diet is going to have more energy. It's easier to explain net energy to a producer than it is a technical person. They get all involved in everything too deep. But you don't buy bean meal as an energy source, right? Everybody should shake their head like that. Bean meal is a protein source. You use grain for your energy. The grain is the energy part of that diet. So what you want to do is you want to keep bean meal down, grain up, and then on a net energy basis, this is going up about 36 kcals for every 0.15. I've added 0, 0.15, or 0.3 synthetic lysine. So the energy is going up. So even though you haven't added any fat to the diet or oil, corn goes up, protein goes down. So the protein is 21 down to 18, and your energy is up higher, about 70-some calories. And then also have a cool diet. So that's why net energy is so important. Net energy, without getting into too much chemistry, gross energy is just a total energy in the ingredient or the feed. You collect the feces and you assay that. That'll give you digestible, how much of the energy was digested. If you collect the urine, assay what's lost in that, you have metabolizable. If you take out heat increment, which is the heat of digestion, breathing, and all that, now you're down to net energy. That's what's left to actually let the pig grow. This piece here isn't what's left to let the pig grow. I mean, it'll look similar. You'll fool yourself. That's, when we first started doing amino acid diets, university guys said, well, you do amino acid diets, the pigs are fatter. And I said, you're not counting all the energy. And they said, well, the energy isn't that different. That's because they were doing this net ME, and yeah, they look not different, but on the net energy, they're quite different. So, of course, you're going to get a fatter pig if you don't adjust amino acids. You don't pay attention to how much energy the pig's getting. So this just shows the difference. If you look at, this is Heartland Lysine's numbers. There's 72, bean meal 72% of the energy of corn on a net energy basis. NRC says it's 84. NRC is too high. This is actually a little bit high. We use a lower number than that. We really penalize bean meal on our net energy basis. As I said, we basically just penalize bean meal very severely. So then the combination of grain and synthetics will be cheaper than soybean meal and fat. So we've never had, in the past 10 years, we've never had an instance where synthetics didn't least cost into our diets. 2 or 3 years ago, threonine got real high, lysine was high, and some of the universities and one of the breeding companies was saying, oh, we'll have to go back to corn soy diets and not use synthetics. And we were thinking, boy, this is great, because this was like February. And we knew as soon as summer came, if they used those diets with a lot of bean meal, and we used our diets with a lot of synthetics, it was going to be like racing a Corvette versus a Volkswagen. And we were going to win big time. Pigs were going to eat and they were going to grow on our diets. I probably should have said a Ferrari versus a Volkswagen. I see Ferrari stickers around down here. So NE more correctly estimates the energy of the diet. It penalizes the protein ingredients. And as I said, it places more value on synthetic amino acids, and you lower protein, you reduce the amount of nitrogen excreted, you reduce water intake, so you don't have as much odor. You don't have to break down the protein and the amino acids, and there's health benefits too. Some of the work I did early on in nursery, if you formulate amino acid, lowered protein versus the other, scours were significantly less on a lower protein diet. We'll switch to enzymes, because this is a piece of this as well. Some years ago, phytase I've used ever since it was legal in the United States. I worked with Dr. Cornegay at Virginia Tech for my PhD. He did a lot of phytase work, a lot of the real early work. So as soon as phytase became available, we started using it. We were using it even when we had to pay a premium to use it, because we had one big group in one of the states that had to do everything environmentally correct. So we were paying a premium to use phytase. Then as the production went up, phytase came down. Now it at least costs into the feed. But other than phytase, we thought, well, we'll let the Europeans use enzymes. We don't need them. We've got corn soy. And as I said, we weren't thinking well, and ingredients have gone higher, so we started looking harder. But the enzymes work by breaking down nutrients. There's a lot of anti-nutritional factors that we didn't think about. We thought they weren't a big deal. But those things need to be broken down to help the gut health of the pig, and you don't get as much turnover in the gut, you don't get as much mucus secretion. So that's high in threonine. And threonine, if you look at the ratio, you'll run a trial and it says it's one ratio, you run a trial, it says it's another. And I think a lot of that's the fact that depending on the ingredients of that diet and how much anti-nutritional factor there is, you may raise that threonine. So the enzymes help the digestion, but they also reduce maintenance requirement. So the amino acids you have left go to growth more. And this is, like I said, the enzyme stuff's been around a long time, and we just didn't pay any attention. we thought a couple % improvement in nutrient digestibility was no big deal when corn was $1 a bushel and bean meal was $100 a ton, and we didn't worry about it. Now we get much more excited about a small improvement. And the other thing, let's see if I'm on the right one. Yeah, if you have an enzyme cocktail, it works better than if you just have an enzyme. This work was in turkeys, but if they fed phytase as a cocktail, is better than pure phytase. So enzyme cocktails is what we've worked on. We don't just sell an enzyme, we have a mixture. Enzymes, sometimes the endogenous, the enzymes the pig produces, I think is not enough. If you finish your hogs, when you get done with the finishing, you have to sell, at least we do, there might be 3 loads or more out of that barn. I mean, you got the first pigs go out, and you got some more pigs go out, and you're a couple weeks or more empty in the barn. Now, why do some of these pigs grow so much better than others? Well, there's health and a lot of factors, but I think one of the factors, if we really looked at it, is some pigs have the ability to produce more digestive enzymes than others, so they get more nutrition out of the feed. Now, the enzymes that you put in the feed, they're the same as what the pig would produce. An enzyme, for it to break down the ingredients, like a lock and a key. You have to have the right key to get the lock to open, and to get phytase to break down, or to get starch components to break down, you got to have just the right enzyme. So what the pig produces and what we can add synthetically are the same thing. But then you boost that, and what you get when we go in and start doing diets for people, they come back and they say, boy, the hogs are much more uniform. And I think what it is we bring the pigs that don't have as much enzyme, we help them significantly. So we improve the digestibility of the diet, but we improve the uniformity of the pigs. So even what we did is, as we worked on this stuff and reviewed and what all the people said the enzyme would do, and then we put together enzyme cocktail and we put nutrient loadings on it. So we developed our own nutrient matrix. We give it credit for amino acids, energy, and phosphorus. And then we can formulate the diets, and we can lower the bean meal, the fat, and the phosphorus. And what it does is it significantly improves the diet cost. This is a pretty busy slide with just a whole bunch of phytase and amino acid. Whoops, punched the wrong one. I messed up now. Oh, there we go. Thought I'd totally lost it. This shows there's a lot of variability in what people get, so you kind of got to do your own work and figure out what values work for you with the enzyme cocktail you have. So we had worked, and we did, I made the mistake of running one trial with a customer. They had a research barn. So I ran this trial, we put the enzyme in, and we were too aggressive in the credit we gave it. And we did poor. I mean, we lost 3 kilos per pig. That wasn't a good idea, because then I've had a hard time selling them enzymes. I finally did, but I really stubbed my toe by putting that in before you had your homework done. So we had ran quite a few trials looking at how much nutritional credit we could give this, and we finally got to what we were comfortable with, and we did this trial. And this normal was enzyme added with almost no credit. It was 25% bean meal, 24, and then this one's 23, where we gave the enzyme the credit we thought it could do. And then fat also is down, and corn is up. And we're formulating to a 1.1 lysine, and we equalize the energy. And when we did that, if we put this in, this was the control, they gained 0.58. Whoops, wrong line. 0.3. If we didn't give the enzyme hardly any credit, they gained 0.34. If we deformulated the diet, remember here we took out 2% bean meal and a little over about 0.5% fat, we got the same gain as over here, and we got the same feed conversion. That the diet's $342 versus $349. And that's basically the way we've been doing, especially a few years ago when people were losing $20 a hog. They were quite interested in this. We did a lot of diets up in the States. If feed company A lines up this producer as barns and all, then they get to feed the diet. We would go in and just reformulate and put our enzyme pack in, and we were saving people $5, $7 a hog in feed costs. So quite a significant change in there. So the other thing is that not all enzymes are equal. There's differences in them, and we have to spend time screening them when we do pig work, and we do chicken work. We use the chickens partly as a screen, not that they might directly influence the way we do the pig stuff, but we can look at it in the chickens, and you can do a lot of work with a little bit of feed and a little bit of cost when you do poultry work compared to hogs and feeding 1,000 of them. This is a trial that we just did in hogs, and this is the number of pens. And you probably wonder, or maybe you don't wonder, the nutritionists in here will probably wonder, why we've got 17 pens and 15 and 18. Hogs are pretty smart critters, and what happened, we got this trial going, and the hogs figured out how to pull the pins on the gates. So the workers go in, and there's hogs running all over the nursery, it's late nursery. Well, the ones that got out and you don't know what pen they're in are blown, and you got to take it off the trial because you don't know where to put them back. So anyway, we had 15 to 18 reps is what that would boil down to. This is just 5 different enzyme cocktails. And there's not a difference in gain. There's a feed intake's not significantly different, but the feed gain is. If this letter is different, like B and C, then A is significantly different. So this worked good, 162. This is a 166, so it's poorer and significantly poorer. This is a 164, but it's an A and that's an A, so they're not significantly different. This one is. So there's differences in these enzyme blends, and then we screen and see which one is the most cost-effective, which one gives us the most consistent performance. The other thing that I would have to say stumbled onto, I think, is when we put the enzymes in, we always look, when we run trials, we look at gain and feed gain, of course, but we also look at how many shots did we have to give, or injections of drug, how many pigs died, how many pigs you had to take off test. So with the enzymes, we got looking, and I think at least 90% of the time there's lower death loss when we put the enzymes in versus the other. And this is a comparison of 14,000 hogs. Now, competitiveness means that there was no enzyme in it, or minimal. And this was our full-blown enzyme. And this is survival. 94.6 pigs lived. They had 93. So we sold 94 more hogs at the end of the deal than they did. This one is this is a trial, 19 pens each, only 400 pigs, but performance is similar, but this would have been a deformulated diet. But the death loss is 10.6, and it's 8.89. So again, it's lower. In this trial, this is the one I showed before. So this is mortality instead of livability. It's 5 versus 6. We cost $89 for feed, they were $91. But look at the water. Our pigs drank 266 gallons of water. Their pigs drank 300. We fed 35 basically kilos of bean meal per hog from, we should have converted, that'd be about 22 kilos, we missed that one. They had 57, 3.7 kilos of fat, 5, no phosphorus, they had 0.63. The water part, you probably wonder why they would drink less water. Well, if we have lunch and they feed you a whole bunch of shrimp or something high protein, you're going to drink a lot. If you eat a big steak or big pork chop, the more protein you eat, the more water you've got to drink. Because you're going to have to break down the protein, you're going to have to excrete out the ammonia that your body's going to produce. So there's less water, and this is a cost savings too, because it costs money, at least in the States, to pump the pits and get that stuff spread out. So there's a savings that we don't even count from that standpoint. So that's the whole thing. And I'm kind of a serious car nut. I own one of them. It's not a race version. But nutrition is like car motors. I've got a car that's got a 5.7 liter motor, and it's got 405 horsepower, but it'll still get 30 miles to the gallon. Now in the old days, we couldn't get 400 horsepower out of, and not be streetable, drivable. You couldn't get 405 horsepower out of a 5.7 liter motor. And if you got anywhere near there, it got maybe 18 miles to the gallon if you're lucky, not 30. And we do the same thing in nutrition. And structurally, the motor, the internal combustion engine, it hasn't changed that much. If you look at it, the same structure kind of, but they keep fine-tuning, changing valves, changing this. And we do the same thing with diets. I mean, we kind of preach the same sermon of how we do it, but we keep fine-tuning and adjusting, and we keep making it more efficient to drive costs down so you can make more money. I mean, you're not in the hog business just for a hobby. You're in it to make money, and we got to keep feed costs down because that's a big part of your cost structure. Thank you.